They expected torture. Instead, they found a civilization thriving beyond their wildest dreams. In September 1944, 47 Japanese women, captured during the liberation of Saipan, stepped onto American soil at Oakland Army Base. They were nurses, teachers, civilian workers for the Imperial Japanese Army, bracing for barbaric treatment, exactly what Japanese propaganda had promised from the demon Americans. But instead of brutality, they were met with electric streetlights, paved roads, and buildings towering beyond imagination. The real shock came with a chilling realization. Even prisoners of war in America lived better than most Japanese civilians had before the war. Michiko Tanaka, a 23-year-old former army nurse from Hiroshima, pressed her face to the military transport window. She whispered, "This cannot be the same America we were told about." Michiko was about to discover her entire perception of the enemy was wrong. Michiko, an army nurse since 1943, had volunteered out of patriotic duty. Propaganda taught her Japan fought a noble war against a primitive, resource-poor America. Wooden shacks, bad food, inferior tech. Her convoy ride through San Francisco towards the internment facility at Crystal City, Texas, would shatter those lies. Michiko stared in disbelief. Cars filled every street. Not just military vehicles, but private automobiles owned by ordinary citizens. Electric signs advertised products she'd never heard of. Buildings soared with architectural sophistication that dwarfed Tokyo's structures. "Nurse Tanaka," whispered Ko Yamamoto, a teacher captured from Saipan. "Look at the clothing American women are wearing. Even common people dress better than our officers' wives." Michiko followed Ko's gaze. Her understanding of the world fundamentally shifted. American women walked freely, in colorful dresses made from fabrics considered luxuries in Japan. They carried leather handbags, wore cosmetics, and moved with a confidence impossible for a nation supposedly weakened by war. "This is not possible," Michiko murmured. "We were told America suffered shortages, that their people were starving, their cities primitive. But the evidence streaming past their windows told a different story. America wasn't just surviving the war, it was thriving. The abundance was overwhelming, almost offensive, to women who had lived years with rationing, blackouts, and constant shortages. As their transport headed to the railway station for Texas, Michiko understood. Japan hadn't just underestimated American military power. They had fundamentally misunderstood the entire nature of American society. The 3-day train journey from California to Texas became an astounding cross-country education. Michiko and the others watched speechless as endless farmlands, massive factories, and prosperous cities rolled past, an impossible display of American abundance. "Look at the farms," said Sachiko Watanabe, a communications operator. "The fields stretch beyond the horizon. Every farm has machinery I've never seen before." Michiko watched enormous tractors working fields that dwarfed anything in Japan. Agricultural technology was decades ahead. Single American farms seemed larger than entire Japanese villages, but cities shattered their worldview. Passing through industrial centers like Chicago and St. Louis, they witnessed manufacturing facilities producing goods on a scale that explained how America fought a war on 2 continents while maintaining civilian prosperity. "Tanaka-san," Ko whispered, "if America has this much industrial capacity, how did our leaders believe we could win?" The question haunted Michiko as factory after factory, each larger than Japan's biggest, streamed past. Hundreds of them, smokestacks reaching the sky. Evidence of production levels that met both civilian and military needs simultaneously. American guards were surprisingly friendly, offering food and answering questions. Sergeant Mary Rodriguez, a Mexican-American woman from Texas, noticed Michiko's fascination. "You seem surprised," Sergeant Rodriguez said in careful English Michiko understood from her medical training. "America is different than we were told," Michiko replied hesitantly. Sergeant Rodriguez smiled sympathetically. "What were you told about America, miss?" Michiko struggled to explain the complete contradiction. "We were told Americans were poor, your cities small, your people had no culture or technology." Sergeant Rodriguez nodded with surprising understanding. "Propaganda tells people what their governments want them to believe, not what's true." You'll learn more about real America where you're going. Crystal City internment camp in Texas offered the most shocking revelation. Even in captivity, Michiko would live better than she had as a free citizen in Japan. The camp boasted neat rows of houses with running water, electricity, and indoor plumbing, rare luxuries in rural Japan. Each unit had a small refrigerator, electric lighting, and communal laundry with modern washing machines. "This is impossible," Michiko murmured. "Prisoners cannot live like this." But accommodations were just the start. The camp had a hospital with modern medical equipment surpassing most Japanese civilian facilities, a school with textbooks, labs, and resources exceeding many Japanese schools, even a library, recreation, and workshops. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the medical director, discovered many Japanese women, even those in military positions, showed signs of chronic malnutrition. Their medical histories revealed a society suffering severe resource shortages long before the war. "Miss Tanaka," Dr. Mitchell said through a translator during Michiko's exam, "when did you last have a full medical checkup in Japan?" Michiko struggled. "Perhaps 3 years ago. Medical care was difficult, even for military personnel." Dr. Mitchell made notes for intelligence reports. "Here at Crystal City, you'll have regular medical care, dental treatment, and access to vitamins and medications to restore your health." The promise seemed too good. In Japan, even military nurses struggled for supplies. The idea of prisoners receiving better health care than Japanese military personnel seemed impossible. Yet as days passed, the impossible became routine. 3 meals daily with meat, vegetables, dairy, hot showers with unlimited water, electric heating in winter, cooling fans in summer, books, magazines, educational programs. "Kosan," Michiko told her colleague one evening in their electrically lit apartment, "I am beginning to understand why Japan is losing this war." Within weeks, Michiko volunteered at the camp's medical facility. She found American medical technology and practices decades ahead. The hospital had X-ray machines, modern surgical equipment, and pharmaceutical supplies exceeding her military hospital in Hiroshima. Dr. Mitchell recognized Michiko's training, assigning her to assist with both Japanese and German families, working alongside American staff. Michiko daily encountered technological and social advances that contradicted everything Japanese propaganda had taught her. "Miss Tanaka," Dr. Mitchell explained, "these sulfa drugs treat infections that would have been fatal just years ago. American pharmaceutical companies develop treatments we happily share with our prisoners." Michiko held the small white pills, medical advances she'd never heard of. In Japan, such medications, if they existed, were for high-ranking officials. Here, they were routine for common prisoner infections. Medical revelations were only part of her education. Educational programs taught prisoners about American democratic society. Michiko attended classes challenging every assumption she'd held. Professor James Thompson, a retired educator, led discussions. "Miss Tanaka," he asked, "what were you taught about American society?" Michiko struggled. "We were taught Americans had no culture, were selfish individualists with no loyalty, their government weak and chaotic." Professor Thompson nodded. "And what do you observe here?" Michiko looked around. American staff volunteering to educate enemy prisoners. Systematic organization providing better living conditions than most Japanese civilians. Democratic processes allowing prisoner participation. "I observed that we were taught lies," Michiko said quietly, the words feeling dangerous. Professor Thompson's response was gentle, profound. "Truth is always more complex than propaganda suggests. Your learning societies can be very different from how their enemies portray them." That evening, Michiko began writing in a diary. A first-hand account of discovering her enemy was not primitive and barbaric, but an advanced civilization treating even prisoners with dignity and care. By Christmas 1944, Michiko's transformation was complete, but it brought a crushing moral crisis. 6 months living better as an American prisoner than she ever had as a free Japanese citizen. The implications were too painful. The camp's Christmas celebration provided final devastating proof of American abundance and generosity. Despite global war, gifts for children, special turkey meals, and entertainment. Michiko watched American volunteers distribute gifts to Japanese children, technically enemy prisoners. Tears streamed down her face. The generosity was overwhelming, yet it represented the complete collapse of everything she'd believed about the war. "Tanaka-san," Ko said quietly, "I received a letter from my family in Osaka today." Letters from Japan were rare and desperate. "What news?" Ko's voice broke. "My mother writes they are eating tree bark to survive. Bombing destroyed most of the city. She asks if I'm suffering terribly from brutal Americans." The irony was a physical pain. While their families starved in ruins, these prisoners lived in comfort exceeding peacetime Japan. While mothers worried about brutality, daughters received medical care, education, and treatment demonstrating a level of civilization Japan had never achieved. "What will we tell them when the war ends?" Michiko asked. "How can we explain America is nothing like what our government told us?" Ko looked at Japanese prisoners singing Christmas carols alongside American guards. "How can we explain we've been living better as prisoners in America than we ever lived as free citizens in Japan?" That night, Michiko made a life-defining decision. She began writing detailed letters to her Hiroshima family, describing the truth about American society, the lies of Japanese propaganda, and the reality that Japan was fighting an unwinnable war against a far more advanced and humane civilization. She knew the letters wouldn't reach Japan wartime, but she wrote them anyway, a record of discovery, how enemy kindness proved more devastating than military defeat. Spring 1945 brought devastating news. Through Red Cross, Michiko learned Hiroshima was bombed, her family's neighborhood evacuated. More shocking than destruction was her mother's forced propaganda. "My dearest daughter," her mother wrote, "we hope you are enduring torture and starvation. We are proud you suffer for the emperor rather than submit to enemy kindness." Michiko read these words in the camp library, surrounded by books her mother could never imagine owning, after a breakfast more nutritious than her family had eaten in years. The disconnect was profound, sickening. Dr. Mitchell found her crying. "Bad news from home, Dr. Mitchell," Michiko said. "My mother believes I'm tortured and starved. She'd be proud I'm suffering for Japan, but I'm not suffering. I'm living better here than I ever lived in Japan." Dr. Mitchell nodded. "Michiko, what your mother believes about America and what America actually is are two different things, just as what we believed about Japan and what Japan actually is might be different, too." This conversation sparked a profound realization. If Japanese propaganda was wrong about America, perhaps American propaganda about Japan was equally distorted. Maybe both nations contained good and evil. But one fact was undeniable. America had the industrial capacity and social organization to fight a global war while treating enemy prisoners better than Japan could treat its own civilians. This wasn't propaganda. It was measurable reality. "Dr. Mitchell," Michiko asked, "when the war ends, what will happen to us?" "You'll be repatriated." Dr. Mitchell smiled sadly. "You'll go home, rebuild your lives. But what if—" Michiko struggled. The thought felt like treason. "What if we don't want to go home? What if we want to stay in America and help build peace?" Dr. Mitchell saw something unprecedented, an enemy converted not by force or propaganda, but by human kindness and a better way of life. In June 1945, Michiko received permission for a remarkable program. Selected Japanese prisoners would work with American researchers studying Japanese society for post-war reconstruction and peace. Professor Helen Bradford, an anthropologist from Columbia University, saw an extraordinary opportunity in Michiko, a bridge between two cultures taught to hate. "Miss Tanaka," Professor Bradford explained, "I'm trying to understand how two civilized nations had such wrong ideas about each other. Your perspective could help prevent future conflicts." Michiko found herself in a surreal position, explaining Japan to Americans who genuinely wanted to understand, while comprehending her own false understanding of America. "Professor Bradford," Michiko said, "I think the problem is both countries learned about each other from their governments, not their people. Japanese leaders told us Americans were barbaric because they needed us to hate you. Perhaps American leaders told you Japanese were barbaric for the same reason." Professor Bradford made notes. "What do you think would happen if ordinary Americans and Japanese could meet without government interpretations?" Michiko thought of Crystal City, Germans, Italians, Japanese sharing spaces, dining, education, with minimal conflict. When people met as individuals, humanity overrode ideology. I think we'd discover we have more in common than our leaders wanted us to believe, Michiko replied. Fear and hatred require distance. Understanding requires proximity. This led to an unprecedented proposal. Professor Bradford recommended selected Japanese prisoners, including Michiko, remain in America as cultural ambassadors and researchers. The idea reached high levels of government. Former enemy prisoners as bridges? Revolutionary but compelling, Dr. Mitchell informed Michiko. You'd be among the first Japanese women to live freely in American society. You could help both countries understand each other better. The offer represented everything Michiko dreamed of since discovering America's reality. But it also meant abandoning family, homeland, identity. The choice would define her future and potentially Japanese-American relations. August 6, 1945. Hiroshima's destruction by an atomic bomb changed everything. News reached Crystal City, leaving Japanese prisoners stunned. For Michiko, it was devastating. Hiroshima was her home. Everyone she loved lived within the blast radius. Dr. Mitchell found her, staring, world ended. Michiko, I'm so sorry. Any word on your family? Michiko shook her head. Dr. Mitchell, I understand now why you've been so kind. You knew this was coming, didn't you? America had weapons to destroy cities. Dr. Mitchell sat beside her. Few knew about the atomic bomb, Michiko. But yes, some leaders knew the war would end with something terrible. The bombing of Hiroshima, then Nagasaki, explained everything. America's industrial capacity, technological advancement, and social organization hadn't just allowed them to treat prisoners well. It enabled weapons that ended the war in days. The kindness you showed us, Michiko said quietly. Was this because you knew we'd need to live together after the war? Because you knew Japan would be completely defeated? Dr. Mitchell considered. I think the kindness was because we're human beings, and treating people humanely is what civilized societies do. But you're right that it will help us build peace together. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. Michiko listened with relief and overwhelming sadness. The war was over, her world transformed. What will you do? Ko asked. Will you accept Professor Bradford's offer? Michiko looked at the camp. Her home, school, laboratory. She thought of her family in Hiroshima, Japan rebuilding. I think I must go home first, Michiko said. I need to see what happened to my family and my country. But after that, I want to spend my life building bridges between America and Japan, so our children never again learn about each other through war. The decision felt right. Despite being the most difficult path, returning to a devastated homeland, forever an outsider with newfound knowledge. September 1945. Repatriation began. Michiko prepared to return to a homeland she barely recognized. Photos and reports showed cities in rubble, starvation, society collapsed. Tanaka-san, an official at the repatriation center, said, You look well fed. Americans must not have treated you as harshly as we feared. Michiko struggled. How to explain American treatment was better than most Japanese civilians experienced during the war. Living conditions exceeding peacetime Japan? The Americans, she said carefully, treated us according to their own standards of civilized behavior. The bureaucrat looked confused. Michiko realized her first challenge. Helping her own people understand their former enemies were capable of humanity. Her journey to Hiroshima revealed the catastrophe's full extent. The atomic bomb hadn't just destroyed buildings, it had vaporized a way of life. Her family's neighborhood was shadows burned into concrete. Surviving relatives lived in makeshift shelters, suffering radiation sickness and despair. Her mother, aged beyond years, embraced her daughter. Michiko-chan, you've come back! We feared Americans killed prisoners when they used their terrible weapon. Michiko looked at her mother, then at the medical supplies from Crystal City, antibiotics, vitamins, equipment Japan wouldn't possess for years. Mother, I have much to tell you about America, and what our government never told us. For weeks, Michiko used her medical training on atomic bomb survivors, carefully sharing observations about American society. Difficult, painful conversations. She explained their suffering wasn't American brutality, but Japanese leaders starting a war against a fundamentally misunderstood nation. America is not our enemy, she told survivors in a clinic. America is what we must become if we want our children to live without this war. The statement was controversial, dangerous. But Michiko committed to truth. She'd seen what lies and propaganda did to a nation. Japan needed to build its future on accurate understanding, not comforting illusions. By December 1945, Michiko decided. 2 years helping medical relief in Hiroshima, then return to America. Work with Professor Bradford. Build educational programs to prevent future conflicts between nations that had learned to see each other as human beings, not enemies.